Hello, welcome to today's lecture on how to cite some common sources in your essays according to MLA format. I highly suggest using Purdue University's online writing lab, which if you have trouble with the URL, you can just go to Google, our good old trusty friend, and there's Purdue Writing Lab, and then the MLA specific one, which is the one that you will want for our MLA papers. OWL Purdue also has resources for other citation sources, so if you're writing a paper for another class, you need APA or Chicago, you can also find those on this website as well. But today we are looking at MLA. So I just personally like this. I use it especially whenever I find myself trying to cite something that perhaps has an unusual source, or if sometimes you might forget something. Now, I know a works cited page can sometimes look intimidating, but I promise you, once you start practicing using MLA, it will just seem really common and easy, and you'll start to learn the pattern, and you might not even need to always check the website, but it is good to check every now and then, especially since sometimes the MLA book can change, though usually if that happens, that will only happen in a while, and it changed already a couple years ago, so I hope that means we won't have another change. But if there is a recent change, your professor should let you know. So we have some basic rules. Your works cited page should be on a separate page at the end of your research paper. You title it Works Cited. Now that is, of course, if you have multiple works. If you're only citing one source, it should just be work cited, because works suggests plural, like that you have more than one source. It should be double spaced, as is our whole paper in MLA. And then we also indent the second and following lines of our citation. And then with the citation, we do not repeat numbers. So if you have some page numbers saying that something appeared on pages 225 to 250, you just write 225-50. And if it's on multiple pages, you use E dot. And if it's just one page, you just do P dot. And so we're going to look at this works cited example page that I have prepared. And it has just some basic examples. Also remember that your works cited page, your sources should be in alphabetical order according to the author's last name. Or if there's a case where you do not have an author for a certain work. So let's say this author was not here. Achilles heel, AC is before AP, so then this would be ahead of that. So whatever is the beginning of your citation, it should be in alphabetical order. So we see here, our first example is going to be from a book. This book, you can see, is one of our classical sources. So a lot of times when we have classical sources like Homer or Plato, which we tend to use in college, and it's just a great source, but you'll be seeing that in a lot of your courses and in my course. So we have this example, Apollodorus. It's just one name because he's a classical author and does not have the usual first and last name. Title of the book, translator, because I do not read ancient Greek. The publishing house, and then the year it was published. So if we go back to our Purdue OWL website, we can go to works cited page books, and this will give you lots of examples of how to do your books. It also has the general format, so you have author, title. Also make sure to pay attention to the punctuation of where periods are and where commas are. If you remember, well, actually, this might not apply to you. You guys are actually kind of younger. A couple of years ago, which is already 4 years now, the some things changed from being periods to commas, and I know some students had trouble switching over, or they would make that mistake because they had been so used to the old way. But I think y'all, at least through high school, should have been with the new MLA format. So this is probably not going to bother you too much. So you have author, period, title, period, and you have the title of the container if your book is in a special kind of container. Contributors, so this is where if your book was translated or edited, then it would come after that. You have a comma, your version if there's a different edition, comma, volume and or number if that applies, comma, publisher, comma, publication date. So we do not really use city of publication anymore. You may remember a time when we would say London or New York City or that kind of thing, but that is not really applicable anymore. Location, so this is not city of publication, but location as in pages, paragraphs, a URL or DOI if that applies. So this is if you have your source from online. And then if it's in something else, then it continues further. But if you have just a regular hard copy book, it should stop around here instead of continuing. But if your source does continue, you'd have your second container's title, other contributors, remember that's our translator or editor, and it's just kind of repeating what we saw above. And then access, so if it's an online source, you might have an access date. So first we have our basic book format. Last name, first name. So remember, last name always comes first when it is our first author. Period, title of book. Your book title should always be italicized. City of publication. So remember, that's only if this book was published before 1900 or the publisher has offices in more than one country, or if it is a publisher unknown. Typically, we don't really see this anymore. See here for the examples, you don't really see the city of publication. You have your publisher and publication date. So let's go back to our example. So you have Apollodorus, just one name in this case, period. The title is The Library of Greek Mythology. This is all italicized, period. Then translated by, so in these examples, it's last name and then first name, but after that first person, you go regular, so it's first name and then last name. So translated by Robin Hard, comma, Oxford University Press, comma, 2008, period. And that is the end. If you use some online sources might have something extra. I think before we used to say book, or what was it that we used to say? I think we used to say book at the end, but we don't do that anymore. It just ends there. So again, I know it's very easy to use an online citation source. Some websites will automatically give you one. It is fine to use that as a guide, and it will sometimes put it in roughly the right order, but be wary. They tend to make lots of mistakes. They put things in order, out of order. They have problems with the punctuation. Always double check if you're going to use one of those automatic citation websites, or if it's on the website that produced it. I think a lot of websites that let you look up sources will also have an option to provide a citation. Just be looking out for that there might be a mistake, and always double check it. Don't just copy and paste it in. You might have some problems. So also you see how this is indented, the second line. This makes it very easy to read. So in your paper, you will be citing sources, And then after I read your paper, or whoever your teacher is will read your paper, they want to quickly see your work cited. They'll see exactly where you got your sources, and it makes it easy to read. It's like little bookmarkers hanging out. This makes your page look neat. Then we also have some other examples. So here we have a different example, and we will look at that. So typically you have books by one author. Sometimes you may have a book with more than one author. If there's a book with more than one author, the first author, and this is by alphabetical order, or if it's how it's presented on the book. So if the book presents them in a certain order, that's the order you would follow. You'd have the first author's name, last name, first name, comma, and then the second author's name, just first and last name, the way we normally write things. So for here we have Harris, comma, Stephen L, comma, and Gloria Platzner, period. Then this other book, Classical Mythology, Images and Insights. This is italicized, period. And then this has an addition. So you can also look at edition of a book. You have period, third edition. So the edition, the abbreviation ED is shortened to just ED, period, comma. This is different from when you have an editor. If you have an editor, see here, it's just edited by the person's name. So we have fourth edition, McGraw-Hill, comma, 2003, period. So that was what it looks like for hard copy sources. And I'm not going to go through all of them. If you have more questions, just because this is common sources, now you can look at this website if you have more questions. So if you have two or more books by the same author, you would have 3 dashes, period, and then cite the second book. That's what it looks like if you have 2 or more books by the same author. That may happen in a class, especially if it's a class about a certain author or if your paper is by a certain author. So let's say you're taking a class on Shakespeare and you're going to read about multiple Shakespeare plays. Maybe you might have something like this. And then if you have book by corporate author organization, book with no author. There's no author, you just omit the author's name. Translated book, this is what we see often, is translated, and that's why we have this example of translator. So if it's following a period, you have a capital letter, but so if we had an editor instead, let's say if there was an editor, you would have edited by, but in this case, you just have translated by. I think before we used to just say trans period, then the translator's name, but now we type it all out to be translated. Translated by, republished. If you have a republished book, that may be important. You have edited by, you have a comma edited by instead of the period there. Subsequent edition, adapted, anthology or collection, you may have a collection and you can see how that is prepared. And so you can see there's lots of different kinds of books that you can see. And if you have a short story or poem, and we actually have something similar to this that we're going to look at in a moment, but we'll look at that a little bit later. Reference book, multi-volume, preface, the Bible. I know a lot of people reference the Bible and they get confused, especially because you need to refer to the version. You can't write just the Bible. So it's the Bible or the New Jerusalem Bible, period, whatever version you're using. the publisher, and then the year it was published. So those are just a lot of our common book sources. Now we're going to look at periodicals. This gives us how to look at periodicals. I think a lot of the time we tend to use periodicals, but they will be online. So if you do an online one, it would be like this, but with extra information from online. If you find a hard copy of a scholarly journal, this is what it will look like. But since for the most part, we find periodicals on databases, we will move on to electronic sources. So we have our electronic sources, and then this is important to note, is that many scholarly articles found in databases include a DOI, a digital object identifier, and it is recommended to cite the DOI number instead of the URL if it is given to you. If you do not know the DOI, you can just use the URL. But when you use the URL, you do not keep the HTTP part of the URL. Also, we always cite when we accessed it. So the access date, so that's when you found that article and accessed it for the first time. So again, so you can look at this and you can see that we have some similarities to our book. We have our author, and this would be last name, comma, first name, period, title. So if there is a title of a article or poem or short story, this would be in quotation marks, period, title of container, comma, translator and editor, just like we had with our book, version and number. So again, like we had with our book, publisher, publication date, and location. And then period, and then our second container title. This is going to be more relevant to us now if we are online, because this is where you're more likely to get a second container. And then that information repeated again, but then comma, and then date of access if this applies to you. So this is if you cite an entire website. Normally, I don't think we really cite entire websites. In most of the papers I see, we are actually citing certain articles on them, but if you want or need to cite an entire website, this is how you do so. It's a bit simpler. Course or department websites, page of a website. Now, this is what you will probably see more often. Now, some websites you see, it tells you who the author is, sometimes not. If it does not give you the author, you just have the article title here. And then the website will be italicized like you did with the publisher. Then you have the comma, the website. So you see there's no HTTP nonsense. It just goes straight to the website. And then a period, and then the date it was accessed. You'll notice that in this example, you have the date that the article was written. So again, it depends on what information is available on the website. So if it gives you the date that the article or web page was created, you will put that in your citation. But if it is not available, then you will just leave it out. And if you have an ebook, you just add ebook in there after the title. And this is where you would put, instead of version, you would put the ebook. And this is specifically for publications formatted specifically to an ebook reader. You may be thinking, is our textbook a ebook? Well, if it's formatted for an e-reader, yes. Our textbook is a Word document, and I will be showing you how to cite that. That does not count as an ebook because it is a Word document. Then if you cite an image, we have an article in a web magazine, and here we have article in an online scholarly journal, which is really where you will be having a lot of things from, especially as you move on to higher levels of courses and you will be having research papers. This is where you will be looking. And this is for an online only, and then also for a journal that also appears in print. The main thing is that if it appears in print, they will be in page range. So this is where you have that PP thing, and then the 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 list of page range. So what range of pages that particular article or essay goes through. And then also if it is through an online database, which, and then in our example, you'll see both. So for the online database, remember through our school, we get JSTOR or EBSCO or those other things. You need to cite that as well. So let's look at our example works cited page. So we have this article here. So the last name, Burgess, comma, Jonathan, period, Achilles' heel, the death of Achilles in ancient myth, period. This is in quotation marks. And then that was in a journal called Classical Antiquity. So that is italicized with a comma after it. And you'll see here it's following that same format. So author, title in quotation marks, and then the journal or publication place, well, not publication place, the journal in italics here. So this is called a journal. This one's called emerging, or if it's also in a book, that kind of thing. These are italicized. So it's in a journal called Classical Antiquity, comma. It is volume 4, number 2, and then it has this extra information here, comma, the page range. So instead of having page 217 244, remember we omit that and it's just 217 to 44, period. Now, because this was found through JSTOR, so if we look back here from an online database, ProQuest or Wiley Online Library, so we have JSTOR, the stable URL for JSTOR, period, and then the access date. So accessed, and then it always goes date, month, year. So it's day, month, year. You do not do it hard. It's like normally when we write a date, we would do, April 28th, comma, 2018. That's how we normally write it. This is not the way it is for our MLA format. It goes day, month, year, which is how it is in some other countries. So just pretend you're practicing a foreign language, I guess. And then we have another example. So we have this one, which was found through JSTOR, and then we have this other example. Again, last name, comma, last name, comma, first name, period. And then instead of an article, this was a book that was found. So Greek religion, archaic and classical, period. Translated by John Raffin. And then I think this actually needs to be italicized. I think Blackwell might be the publisher here. So Blackwell, comma, 1985, period. So I think this, when I created our works cited example page, I think it unitalicized there. So now we have that. And then we have the National Library of Australia. So a lot of older books sometimes, not that 1985 is that old, but sometimes some older books might be also be online and they can be cited in weird ways as well. So this is in our second container, National Library of Australia, comma, and then the URL for that, period, accessed 29 April 2008, period. So that's how you cite for those online sources. Again, online just scholarly journals, they just follow that pattern and just make sure that you have all the information that it provides. If there is something in there that you don't need, don't worry about it. Then we have some other stuff that maybe you may use, but maybe not. This is a bit more updated now. It includes tweets or a YouTube video or a comment. Let's see. And then we have other common sources. So if you've been looking for a certain thing, and let's say you're not sure how to cite something, it's not in books, it's not in periodicals, it's not in electronic sources, it may be in other common sources. And if you still can't find it, you may need to get the hard copy version of the MLA handbook or ask your teacher. So we have interviews, so for a personal interview or a published interview, speeches, panels and Q&As, painting, sculpture, or photograph. This is interesting, especially if you're taking an art class, you're writing a paper on something for an art class, I suppose, a song or album, depending on where you find it, films or movies, television shows, podcasts, digital files, so PDFs, MP3s, and JPEGs. Now, this is also where we find Word files. So remember I mentioned our textbook. So you have the name of the article or book, period, and then it ends with Microsoft Word file. The words Microsoft Word are italicized. So at the end of our example page, we have an example from a reading, and for at least this class where we are using the reader, this is where you will get a lot of your sources from, because that's our papers are going to be influenced by our reader. That's where we're getting our ideas from. So we have our author, because it is a classical source. He is called just Plato. His name is not Plato Smith or something like that, just Plato, period. And then from our table of contents, because it was a selection, our table of contents just says from Republic. So that is in quotation marks, period. And then it comes from our book, Writing for Wisdom, a Reader. Writing for Wisdom is italicized, comma. And then I considered HBU to be the publisher because it's not a traditionally published book. It was something created by the professors at the university, comma, the year that it came out, which is 2011, comma, the page range for this selection. So this selection from the Republic is pages 62 to 67. So I don't have it continuing. I don't have 67 here. It's just 27. And then period, and then Microsoft Word file. The words Microsoft Word are italicized, but the word file is not. And then you have a period, and that is it. And so that's how you would cite any of our other works. So if you were going to have, let's say, another work of Plato, you could have the 3 dashes, period, say from, we have another something else from, I feel like we might in our textbook, but let's say let's just pretend we have Greater Hippias there, period, and italicize, close parentheses, space, and then the rest of it, and we'd have to fix our spacing, and then we fix our spacing. And so that's how it would look if we had another except it would be in the opposite order because Greater Hippias would come before Republic because G comes before R. So maybe, let's say we have the symposium, actually, so we can maintain the integrity of the correct, having it all in alphabetical order. So let's see, symposium, period. So that's how you would do that, especially if you're citing from the same author. If, actually, there we go. If you have any questions, make sure to double check the OWL Purdue website. It has almost everything you need. And if you need some other guides in future courses for APA or Chicago, it has that as well. Remember, this is just for the works cited page. It also tells us for general formatting. So if you forget or how to do a general formatting, has general formatting and how to cite your in-text citations as well. So for in-text, you have author's last name, page number, period from where your quote is from, like that. So, but today we were really supposed to just look at works cited. And if you do not recall how to do an in-text citation, just check this article on OWL Purdue or email me or put a question in our discussion board. And perhaps I could make another video on it or just answer your specific question. So I hope you all have a good day. I hope this has helped you in doing a good works cited page. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time.